Excellent. Okay. Oh, so these are our 3 cameras. Okay, but I can stay looking at you, right?
I know. I try to pretend like they're not even there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like we're just like hanging out at like a kitchen table.
This is
it's very bright.
I have a gay brother, and so like this is so stereotypical. But anytime we're at an event, like all his friends like realign for a photo, and I just stand there like, "What is going on?" And they're like, "Better side." I'm like, "What's my better side? I have no idea." And
I have no idea either.
That side. Like what? So I have no idea. I should call him and be like, "Am I on the wrong side? Should I switch?"
You guys are good to get started whenever you are ready.
Okay.
Awesome. I don't know if we'll use this in the episode, but I like to invite anyone that likes doing so to start us off with a short practice. If you want to lead us through something.
Oh, that you want me to lead it?
Yeah.
I would be happy to.
Cool.
Sure. First, I'll just say we can take a deep breath. There's just so much going on in the world, and I think it's a great time to center ourselves. So if we can breathe really deeply, and then out. And we'll do it again, but this time I like to tell people, breathe in all the toxins and all the bad stuff that is swirling around. Breathe that in deeply, because then when we breathe out, we're going to breathe it all really far away from ourselves. So one more time. And now we're clear.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Short and sweet.
How many times a day would you say you sit down and do something that generally folks would say, oh, she's doing a meditation?
I would say I have what I call mindful moments throughout the day. And anytime someone tells me, oh, I'm not a meditator, I couldn't sit down, I can't sit on a cushion, I can't sit for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, my mind works too haphazardly, it's always constantly flooded. I say there are opportunities all the time. One of the things I tell New Yorkers all the time, or even my friends in London, is I say, you could do this commuter meditation, which is you just sit and count the people that are in your subway or train car and just look at each one of them, one person at a time. And by the end of it, what you'll realize is, oh my gosh, I've actually been meditating. It's meditative, right? So here you are on this wild commute in a massive city. You can do this anywhere. You can even do it you can do it if you're driving. You can do it in the grocery line. Like, it doesn't really matter where you are. There are moments to just try to pause and try to stop and look for opportunities to say, how can I better connect with myself? So I honestly, anytime I find myself running out of patience or getting a little agitated, I just look for an opportunity to say, how can I pause? How can I stop? How can I just find my moment? So a lot is the answer to your question.
Yeah, well, I was curious because I was just talking to another meditation teacher friend of mine. And for those listening, we'll get into a little bit more of Elizabeth's background. But one piece is that in addition to the many hats that we both wear, we're both meditation teachers. And I was talking to this other friend of mine who was like, I've really fallen off on my morning practice. I used to do 2 hours every morning, and it doesn't feel like that's what I want to be doing right now. And I've noticed I'm doing it all throughout the day. And a thing that I named was I feel like that happened to me years ago. I remember being at this 10-day meditation retreat and feeling guilty about it. I was like, oh, I also I had that period where I would do 1-hour, 2-hour sits every morning. But instead, eventually it started to just trickle in to every aspect of my life.
Right.
And one of my favorite places now to meditate, which is also one of the places I have a lot of folks when I used to work with clients that are overthinkers that love people watching, is to do mindful people watching, which literally just means pay attention to other people and yourself while you're doing it.
Completely.
So it's sit there at a mall or at a food court or at the park and just sit there and watch people and see what comes up, what stories come up in your mind, what judgments come up, what does it feel like in your body, what kind of things happen that make you laugh, just hold that with curiosity, and it's a ton of fun.
Yeah, and you're exactly right? You don't have to sit in silence for it to be meditative. And for me, having done retreats, makes it even more powerful, because when I do find, wow, I have so much work going on, my mind is going like a million miles per hour, and I'm going to try to sit and actually meditate right now, I find it much easier to be able to drop into the memory of what it was like to be on retreat. Because when you retreat for 5 days or even for a long weekend, when you have that much continuous silence, it just changes you.
Yeah.
Right? It changes your physicality. It changes your mind. It changes your body. It changes the way you connect with yourself. And so I don't go on retreat that often, but the fact that I do have that to reference has made a huge difference, because it just makes it so much easier for me to drop into even 20 minutes of sitting quietly, because I know, wait, now I'm going to be able to conjure that feeling back up.
Totally. And what's interesting is that has so many parallels to systems design when it comes to workplaces. Because when we're thinking about a business is a collection of people delivering value to another collection of people. And so the way that work gets done is about how you structure, how people collaborate, create, and communicate together. And so we all do this. You look at any workplace, you look at any school, you look at any sort of place where people come together in groups. There are macro experiences and micro experiences. You might have like a leadership retreat that you do once a year or once a quarter. You might do like a weekly like all hands meeting with your team, but you have these sort of like macro experiences that then get referenced and carried into like one-on-ones that you have and little like touch points that you do asynchronously. And so it's like thinking about in our personal lives, whether it's retreats or it's music festivals or concerts or vacations with family or with friends, but we all have these sort of macro transformational experiences where we go for connection and regeneration or inspiration that then we like pull treasures out of, that then we carry into and then litter into other aspects of our life.
Completely. And I think, when you think about the design aspects, I mean, you mentioned retreats, right? That's part of my business. I run a lot of strategy offsites for teams. It's one of the big things that I do. And I have a few formulaic things. One I got from a coach years ago, which was we always started with a check-in. Just everyone had to speak, and you had to say no more than anything from one word to a couple sentences to just say how you were feeling at that moment. And it was
And how much time does that usually take for like the whole group?
It depends on the group. I try not to do retreats that have more than 10 people, right? Because it just makes it really hard to facilitate.
Sure.
And it also is a different type of retreat versus a leadership team. So we usually tell people, like, keep it short, right? 1 minute, just a check-in, like really tight and crisp, and it forces them to take a minute to really say, how am I feeling at this moment? How am I showing up here? The second thing that I do is I tell teams, if you're willing to give me a full day to run your strategy offsite and to use a formula of where we're doing business, but we're also really connecting as a team, I would really prefer to do it overnight so that we could do lunch to lunch. And part of that reason is people need that time to themselves in the evenings when they get back to their rooms to just, or even if it's home, if it's local, to just sit and think and process what happened in the day. If you're going to try to keep someone off-site from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m., it's just too much. It's not how the human brain works.
Totally.
And so I find that works really well. And the third thing I do is I try to do something physical with them in the afternoon of the first day, right? So it can be anything like ping pong or croquet or something that's like volleyball at the back of the hotel, like something that just gets people moving just enough that people love to be competitive. But we try to find something that is equalizing in terms of ability. But just that really brings people together in a team format, but it also just gets the blood flowing to the brain. You can't sit all day in a offsite and have, if you can sit all day in a silent retreat, but that's a different experience.
Totally.
But if you're trying to do business and you're trying to get people to connect, you really need to be able to have those human moments and treat them like humans.
Okay, and so teaching meditation, facilitating leadership offsite retreats. I'm curious, could we dive into, for you right now, what is the mission of your life right now? And what are those like big buckets of things that you really spend your time doing?
Yeah, my entire life right now is at the intersection of awareness, humanity, and technology, right?
Awareness, humanity and technology.
And the nexus of, and it can be it could be two elements of that, right? So awareness and humanity without technology, right? And I don't actually teach meditation anymore, like strictly to teach meditation, right? I only use it in corporate environments. I use it with business professionals. I use it in my daily life because for me, it's not something I teach. It is who I am now, right? It's an aspect of my humanity. And so the connection between awareness and humanity is so important because it is the element of not living with our head in the sand in terms of the amount of suffering that we have in the world and the number of problems in the world.
Yeah.
Similarly, the connection between awareness and technology, realizing how often we're engaging with technology, particularly artificial intelligence. The number of people that will tell me, oh, I'm off of the grid. I don't use AI. I don't have those, home pods that listen to you all the time. And I say, you're joking yourself because you are interacting with AI constantly. Every email, 83 billion emails a day go out. They're all filtered by AI. That's how we create spam folders. Every like, every post, every comment, every click, every news article. And so really raising people's awareness of technology and how they're engaging with technology is another intersection. And then, of course, technology and humanity in terms of how those intersect. I'm really fascinated, and this is how you and I first met, was about the intersection of what I call human tech, which is where is technology and where is artificial intelligence able to advance humans in the workplace? Where can we really say, listen, it's really hard to be a human at work. Our brains are not designed. We're designed to be out in the foraging and hunting. We're not designed to sit in offices.
That's the environment we've spent most of our evolutionary history in.
Completely. We weren't designed to work for other people, right? We were designed to work in teams and work in community.
That we have very close connections with.
Completely. Right? And real community. And that's why we find workplaces that are most effective do have community, right?
Yep.
Where they say we are aligned around a common goal. We know, we know where we're headed and we know what we're doing. And I think,
we know what these relationships are. We've defined them and what the boundaries are here, and we communicate them in a way so that there's real clarity of how we're supposed to interact in this community.
Exactly. It is still a professional community, for sure, right? And we have a common goal. And I think even when I take these teams off, when I work with teams and I take them off site, I say, be really clear. When you're talking, everyone loves to have vision, mission, values. I take a little bit of different approach. I like for a team to really build a story of who they are. Because I think some of the time we get so caught up in our vision, mission, values as an organization, we forget, well, wait a minute. Is what we're doing really going to matter?
I really love that because I've found through the years when I start to have conversations with leaders, whether it's 2 or 3 or it's a group of 10, and we start to talk about mission, vision, values, it becomes a weird conversation where it gets clouded by everyone's idea of what the end outcome of their mission, vision, values are supposed to be, as opposed to really digging into what is it that you're doing? Right. what is your business? Why are the people here the ones working on it? Why do you care about it? Why are you waking up every day? What's the core story here? And then let's really define and explore that deeply enough and pour all that stuff on the table. And then we can carve out mission, vision, and values with actually having all the information that we need. But otherwise, if you try to start the other direction, it's cool, let's all just start writing out our mission. It's okay, how do you know you guys are even looking at all the right stuff that's supposed to be out on the table? And
you risk it becoming performative too, right? You risk saying, well, wait a minute, we have to have some version of integrity. We have to have some version of customer, right? Don't we? How can we not?
Right.
Versus really saying, who are we? What are we really trying to do in the world? And what do we really care about? So that we as a community understand, is this those early humans? It was about survival, right? And then it became more about, okay, we can thrive and we can figure out how to advance. We have fire and we have the wheel and we figured out agriculture and now we're advancing as a society. So we understand where we're headed. And I think very often when you just start with, okay, we need mission, vision, and we need our values and don't really look deeply inside, you just leave something on the table that is the truth. And then the number of times I've walked up to people and said, I remember at my very first job out of college, we had our values on our paper cups in the cafeteria.
Nice.
And I would say, put your hands around the cup and now tell me what the 4 values are.
Right.
Like, everyone's like, customer. Right. What were the other 3? Integrity. What are the other 2? I have no idea.
Yeah. Well, and really, your values are not the posters you have on the wall. The values really are the behaviors that people believe in your organization are reinforced, supported, and expected here.
You're right. You're right. And because otherwise it is just performative, right? And otherwise it is, then people are just really eye rolling. Just like, oh, we don't really stand for this, right? We'll say that we do and we communicate that we do, but it's not how we treat people and it's not how we really treat our customers. And so then you might as well not have had anything rather than had something that you don't actually live.
I'm curious what you might say to the executive that sort of eye rolls at the idea of like exploring our story as a business and like kind of wasting time in that end. Like we have so much stuff to get done, to be productive and to be a serious business. I don't want to waste time talking about story. We need to be talking about strategy. I don't want to talk about story. Why does story matter when we're building a business or running a business?
Yeah. And it depends on the executive, because I have had my fair share of eye rollers, and they will often say, I've had executives say, oh, all this, managing people is really just a waste of time. Like we really know what we're trying to do at the end of the day. I came from finance, right? I had a 25-year career in finance. So I have sat across the table from traders who have said, you're taking me offline from a trade, during the trading floor.
Which is significant.
It is. Yeah, this is real money to teach me how to manage people. What are you doing? You're wasting my time, right? So I have lived my share of eye rollers. And I think there's a variety of different types in terms of eye rolling that I see. And what I say, like the baseline of what I say is I have to prove it to them. I have to show it more than say it. So it's not really about what I say. It is really about showing them where they're not decisioning in the right way, where they're having unnecessary conflict, because I'm all about healthy conflict. I love conflict in the workplace.
Sure.
You need it to get to the best ideas. But where you're having unhealthy conflict, where you're not really getting to the best decisions and saying, I have no clue who you are as an organization, right? And I need to be able to show them, do you realize that I'll sit down with a CEO and I'll say, I just interviewed one-on-one your leadership team and this is what I heard. And have he or she look at me and say, gosh, that doesn't really sound like us. And I say, this is why we need your story.
Yeah. Well, and it's really astounding, just being able to have those sorts of experience where you can talk to other people within the workplace. So you might call it a 360 assessment, or just like informally having interviews or just talking to people and like saying, what's your experience of like working here? You dig into that and then you go talk to the leaders and you're like, what do you want this workplace to be doing? What things you want people to be doing? What things you want people not to be doing? And then to be able to point out just like the misalignment here.
Right.
And that's so much of really what comes up for me as the core of the work between that triangle of awareness, humanity, and technology in the modern workplace. Like so much of the challenge that we have in today's world is we are all so overwhelmed. We are so radically overwhelmed with just the rate of innovation that has come with technology and how rattling that has been for folks and how much information we are just immersed with, and all of these technologies and businesses competing for our attention while our physical communities are shifting and changing and the economy's going global. It's just exploded, this sense of uncertainty. And there's so much stuff to pay attention to with less boundaries and structure to our day-to-day lives than we used to have. And so we're overwhelmed.
Right.
And so trying to do something productive when you have a whole bunch of people that are overwhelmed is hard.
Yes.
And the way you do that is with community and structure. And to make sure you create a structure that actually empowers people to be collaborating in a way where they're putting their energy into things that push the business or your group of people in the same direction, the direction that you want to be going, what your high-level OKRs are. In order to make that kind of structure, you really have to be able to build systems for identifying that misalignment. Because just you walking into a room and saying, all right, this is what we're going to focus on this quarter, and then walking away, it's not going to work.
And I think I completely agree, right? And I think, and this is why, like the whole process, like the design thinking and the process makes so much sense. And I think it's more than just focusing on the destination of where we want to get to. It's asking people, how do you also want it to feel as we get there, right? How do you want that journey to feel? Because we can grind through and we can leave blood and broken glass and get there and all say, wow, look at us. We did a great job. We all got to the right place. But did it feel good? Did you feel fulfilled?
But why does that matter?
It does. It matters because I think humans just aren't going there. This is where quiet quitting came from, right? Where people were like, I wasn't really committed. I wasn't really aligned because it just hasn't felt good. Humans are pleasure seekers, right? That is how we're designed. We're designed to feel good. It's what's created addiction. It's what's created ignoring people suffering because we just want pleasure. We just want to feel good all the time, right? And so if we can play into that in a healthy way, or we can say work should feel good. It's what we spend most of our hours doing.
Yeah.
So why not? Why not have it also be fulfilling? Why not be successful and fulfilled at the exact same time?
Yeah, and actually, the framing I give to leaders often is that it's a huge hack that you're missing. It's a huge hack for upgrading your entire operating system for how you get stuff done because you think it's a burden that's in the way of you getting the serious work done when instead it is a supercharged pathway.
Completely.
Because it allows you to harness the psychology of the people that you work with. The hack there is understanding how we're wired.
Right.
Our deepest wiring is that we are constantly seeking coherence, connection, and creation. We are like autonomous beings. We want to feel a sense of power and like progress in our lives. We want to connect with other people and feel recognition and feel like we're making a contribution. And we want to like make sense of what we're doing. And so if you have ways for structuring how people are communicating and collaborating that help them make sense of like how what they're doing connects to the overall direction of the company, and you're actually strategic about making sure people are getting recognized for things, and people are feeling like a sense of progress and growth here, that they get to become more and more of who they are. The hack is you've invested that time, and it's going to pay off in them working harder and staying working there, as opposed to falling into the illusion that humans are like circus animals that you can bribe and threaten to get the amazing creative work done that you need to get done, which just isn't going to work sustainably.
And
it might work in the short term,
it
but
does
sustainably.
Work. And that's unfortunate. It does work in the short term. It's not actually an illusion. And that's the problem, right? Is that we do see, we can often see people as cogs, right? And particularly some of the largest, most successful companies in the world have very high turnover and they don't care.
Well, because they can operate that way.
Completely.
If you have enough cash and you have a premium brand, if you're an Amazon, if you're an Apple, you're a Google, you kind of have the luxury where you can burn through people because there will always be highly talented people that want to work there for the paycheck as well as then the brand on their resume and the experience of getting to see what that's like. But most companies aren't those guys.
Right.
And so that's the struggle, is that we can fall into this trap of trying to operate like we can just focus on the short-term results, not thinking about the impacts that we're making to our own sustainability.
Right. And people are copying that model because it looks like it wins, right? It looks like, okay, this model works. And it does work. It does work for companies, as you said, in the short term, right? Where the number of times I hear people share with me about abusive work environments, it just breaks my heart. I'm literally walk around heartbroken all the time because it's not, I'm not exaggerating if I say almost daily, where someone will tell me my boss said this to me or my coworkers did this to me. And I think, why? Why?
Well,
why is that necessary?
And the ridiculousness of it when you kind of zoom out and you look at where we are in this moment in time. We are the most advanced technologically than we've ever been. And at a macro level, our GDP is the highest it's ever been. We've got so much technology and so much money. And then when you ask people like, well, where is all that money? Well, guess where it is? Most of it's in the big businesses. That's why so many people would love to have a B2B business that's serving the enterprises. So what does that mean? Businesses have the resources. They have the resources and they have the knowledge, the research that we've done through the last few decades on how people are wired and how to support people to actually get stuff done sustainably in ways that are actually good for their well-being. Not a mystery. We have the answers for that. We have the technology to make it happen.
Right.
We have the money to make it happen. It's a design problem. So like, it's like I could stomach it if it was just like, oh, well, you know, I really feel like everyone's doing the best we can. And like those like mistakes happen and people are getting hurt and we have processes so that's not going to happen again. Whereas it feels like, man, why is everyone holding the scissors on the wrong end? Like we've known for a long time that holding scissors like that is a bad move.
Right, completely. I'm with you. I've never actually been more hopeful than I am right now because I do think the core strengths of humans hasn't changed. Human ingenuity, human motivation, if it's channeled in the right way. We know enough about how humans are motivated to be able to manipulate humans in the right direction, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, we've been manipulating them in the wrong direction, motivating them in the wrong direction. Yeah. But we know enough about what humans are capable of. What the world that we have created is really unbelievably impressive. Yeah. It's also unbelievably damaged because we have just caused so much collateral. We've just left trash, literally trash everywhere. And so, but now I'm really hopeful because I feel as though we are at this point, and particularly your generation and the one behind you, I think, and the one behind that, I think you're at a different point. They're at a pivot point where they're saying, well, wait a minute, we can do good without doing the harm. And how do we, how can we do that? And the answer for me is really quite simple. Machine intelligence. We are building it. We've seen how we're using it today. But where it can go, and that's why my number one meditation practice these days is dreaming, where I will literally sit and imagine a fully intelligent workplace and just say, what is it going to look like? What is it going to feel like? How is work going to get done? Who's sitting next to me at the table? Is it an intelligent humanoid? That's okay. I'm okay with that. But how are they behaving? What are they saying? Are they saying, Elizabeth, we haven't heard from you in a while because you're the quiet introvert sitting there not speaking up. What thoughts do you have? And then the manager says, oh, right. I'm the one who's supposed to be doing that, but I'm a human and I forget. But thank God I have this computer now that does that for me.
Yeah.
And so I love to sit and imagine, based in fact, based in human psychology, based in sociology, sit and imagine what is the art of the possible in terms of workplaces of the future.
Well, I think that's a fairly radical take right now to hear you say that you are more hopeful than you've ever been. When really just sort of laying out the pieces of, depression is the leading cause of disability worldwide. Loneliness has never been higher with the number of people that rate the level of loneliness they're carrying around. Opioid overdose is still skyrocketing. You have really just deaths of despair skyrocketing. You've got mass gun violence in the United States continuing to go up and to the right. We seem to be getting further apart and having less productive conversations about politics and policies for how we regulate and structure our society together. And that seems to be getting more vitriolic. So kind of looking at all those pieces, like that someone might be sitting there and saying, hopeful? How the hell could you be hopeful? And then the other layer to add in there is like, okay, well, sure, like AI is cool and amazing technology, but hopeful? Look at who's controlling it. It's this huge concentration of power. The people at the top, the richest, are the ones getting the riches of that, and they have all the control. Why should we trust them? How could I possibly be hopeful?
Yes, all fair points.
So how can all of that be going on and you're still holding this immense hope?
I think on the first point with respect to how bad things have gotten, unfortunately for humans, we're very bad at preventative, right? We're bad at preventative medicine. We're bad at seeing, wait a minute, I'm starting on a downward spiral. Let me stop myself and pull back up. We unfortunately sometimes have to hit the wall, right? We have to get so outraged. Things have to get so bad for us to finally say, I see it in any aspect of people wanting to improve their life, right? Whether it's about your food health or fitness or just relationships, right? Like people don't go to counseling when their relationship is doing okay. They do it when it's about to fall apart, right?
Totally.
So that is just in our nature, is that sometimes things have to get really bad before we're willing to take action.
And I would argue most of the time.
Most of the time.
I was just talking with my group of friends about this. this. One of my dearest friends has been in this like struggle for years with just sort of like coasting by for like a few months and then getting fired from a job, like struggling with different addictions, having these toxic relationships. And like, I'm a licensed therapist. I've been one of his best friends for years. I've helped thousands of people that sort of struggle with the same things. And it's like, I can only do so much. And the reality is, I have never seen somebody radically change their life until the pain of staying the same becomes bigger than the pain of changing.
Mm-hmm. Completely. I actually tried. I was doing, right when COVID happened and I had already left my corporate career, there were a lot of working professional women that were home and just trying to manage what was going on with having children, especially women that had children. And so I started just working with women and trying to say, how are you feeling? What's going on here? And I started going after the women who I said, here's your wake-up call, right? The phone is ringing. Pick up the phone before you run into the wall. It was really, really hard. The only women who were willing to answer were the women who were saying, oh my God, everything is completely unraveled, right? And it's just, and so I saw it. I mean, I saw it firsthand. It's just really hard. So we can agree on that. And that's why it's sad to say, but I am hopeful because I think in many areas we are now at the point where I think people are saying, enough is enough. I just cannot live with the world the way it is. I cannot continue to put my head in the sand and feel good writing my nonprofit check, once a year or whatever it is, or volunteering, or like now like every day needs to be a part of positive change. So I'm hoping that we can harness that power. On the second point, with respect to people that say, well, wait a minute, the elite are running artificial intelligence. 100%, right? But it is not 0.5% of the population is currently programming AI. However, we are all interacting with these algorithms constantly. Yeah,
that's an important point that you make in your newsletter, which I read just before this, reread through all of them. And I love that. So I just want to pause and highlight that for folks. It's this idea that when you really look at who are the people whose hands are actively on developing the AI, the folks that we might think like, oh, who's building this stuff? The machine learning engineers, the AI researchers, the CEOs of those companies. And you highlighted it's like 0.5% of the professional community, the professional population. And it's important to note, those aren't the only people developing AI, because all of the data that goes into teaching and structuring these models comes from all of the things that every person in the modern world is doing.
It's wild when you think about, right? These algorithms are written, and this is like old school, right? We're already advancing. They're written to get smarter, right? They're written to use our data to pull us in a certain direction. So we are the programmers. We are now the AI developers. Every time, and I have friends that will always say to me, my greatest accomplishment in life is that my Instagram feed is like rainbows and puppies. And I figured out how to hack the algorithm by not clicking, right? I'm like, thank God I no longer see the pop-up of what this celebrity looks like now. Because I clicked on it once and for 6 months, that's all I got. I will never, ever do it again.
Side note, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could have a little bit more autonomy and voice around how we get to shape those algorithms so that we didn't have to spend years trying to figure out how to shadow manipulate it so we could get the feed we want.
We do. You're completely right. But shadow manipulating would be a first step in the right direction. Amen. And I think when I look at where, I think I have a big view on government regulation too, right? I think governments are coming along and trying to say, how are we going to regulate this? And that's where you'll see my eyes roll, to be honest. Because I came out of the financial services industry, right? So I know more about government and regulation than most industries. Sure. And I would say, and when I look at the financial services industry and I look at how much the financial services industry has paid to get itself out of trouble for violating regulations, you can buy yourself out of it, right? And I think tech companies are going to figure out the commercial viability of saying, some of these regulations might just be too hard. It may end up worth it to do one of two things. One, just pay the fines assuming they can figure out who is actually going to hold companies accountable to these regulations that we can create.
Sure.
So it may just end up being worth to take the fines because we're just making that much money. Or two,
which is already something that's happening.
It already is. Yeah, we're already seeing it. Or two, what's going to be the pact with individual humans? Am I going to can I pay you for your data in micropayments, right? So now you let me use geopositioning data. I know what time you leave your house in the morning. I know, by the way, that data is already available. I know companies that make investment decisions based on looking at geopositioning data and saying, okay, well, we know this individual household has someone that commutes to this office building, someone that does not commute, and students that go to this high school and this middle school, right? We can see it from their phone data. And so, but what if humans were getting paid for that, right? What if you got micropayments to say you can track me or you can't? How many humans would say, well, you know what? There's some value. What's going to be that
this
contract?
Is useful enough for me. This is like, this doesn't feel like it invades my boundaries too much. Like, sure, I'd be willing to do that to get paid for it a little bit. I think quite a few people. Yeah,
I think so. I definitely think so, because especially the younger they get, because I think more and more they're realizing, well, they're going to have the data anyway, and it's worth it for me for bigger, better, faster.
Okay, so if top-down government-imposed regulation isn't going to be the thing that saves and protects us from harms of tech innovation over the next few years, what is it that you're really naming is the thing that will?
This is where I think we, as a community of humans, really need to understand what our vision is for the future, right? As individuals. Because if we can all say, wait a minute, we agree on a better world. We agree on a world where we don't have starvation, where we don't have addiction, where we don't have just any kind of suffering, right? Where we don't have vitriol, where we don't have infighting, where we can't agree on the problems because we're so caught up in the solutioning. I think we can agree this is a problem, but I think this and I think this, and these are the ways to solve it, right? If we can get to a world where we say, well, wait a minute, if we can just agree that suffering in this way is not okay, then we have a real opportunity for individuals to start saying, okay, now I can start taking action on a daily basis where I'm aware of how I'm interfacing with these AI algorithms all day, that's going to help them solution for us, right? Where there's going to be true partnership there. That's my dream, right? And by the way, I know it's still a dream. I know I'm not sitting here saying this is how we can all program it, because right now it's not all interconnected. Right now we have companies all over the world that are developing their own algorithms, and they're only loosely connected. But we'll get to the point where they are connected, and it will become a massive Jenga tower. And the idea of unplugging it is just a joke, right? That's not going to happen.
Right.
So this is our opportunity as we're laying each Jenga block. Let's think about what's in it, and how are we behaving, and how are we role modeling the world that we want as individuals.
Okay, I think there's a really beautiful and hopeful story in here. I want to even try to polish up and excavate. And so here's what I'm hearing. We named this layer of, as humans, it's really rare that we make massive change until the pain of changing becomes greater than the pain of staying the same. And so that's a truth. One of the hopeful things about this moment in time is where we are, where we have gotten ourselves with the technologies that we have and the way that we're relating. We can communicate information faster and further than any group of humans ever. So the visibility that we have around what kind of stuff is happening, the conversations that we have are infinite in the potential of what we can be talking about. And so really the key is, if we can find ways to come together and explore just what is currently happening, there's enough pain here. The pain of staying the same actually is immense. Right. And so it's actually just a matter of expanding our awareness. And the key to that is coming together as groups of people, because that's how we're wired. We deal with things that are too big and complex and overwhelming for the individual by making it interpersonal, and being able to then have multiple vantage points and have the co-regulation of exploring something immense with a group of people. Oh, we can handle a little bit more stress. We can handle a little bit more of a challenging topic and concept and problem solving. And that's the magic of a republic, that you have this checks and balances, and you have these groups of people that get to hold the people at the highest level accountable. And it's groups of people doing that exploration. And so we have greater potential now to empower groups of people to talk about such wide-ranging things and to see so much of what's going on in the world, that we can really look at what's going on and what's painful, and we can dig into it. And we know a lot about how to actually structure community and groups of people to be able to explore those sorts of things. And we have the technologies now that we need to really help us sort of reorganize some of the challenges, like this immense stress that we feel with everything competing for our attention. So, oh, great, guess what? We've built this technology that is perfectly shaped to help us reorient our relationship with that onslaught of information.
Right.
AI can really help us with that.
Right.
And so the hopeful story I'm hearing here is that there's a huge opportunity for us as groups of people from a more bottom-up perspective to bring a little bit more awareness to what we're doing with our day-to-day actions, where we're spending our dollars, where we're spending our attention, and what sort of things we're advocating for, wanting from the businesses around us, so that then businesses are incentivized to serve those needs. So you'll see things like tech companies making algorithms a little bit more shapeable by the end user because people are asking for it. And so rather than the government saying you need to do that, instead actually like the magic of business, you want more users. If users are then demanding that sort of thing, then it starts to get built in. And so if we can all get better at coming together and really building up the awareness of what we're experiencing, exploring what some of the challenges and problems are, and figuring out how we can advocate together from the bottom up in all sorts of different directions, we've never had a greater opportunity of potential impact for the scope of the systems we can shape and the changes we can make.
Completely, 100%. See, you can come to my Hopeful Soul support group now.
I'm in.
You're in the club.
You have recruited me. I'm in.
And you nailed why awareness, why I can't just focus on humanity and technology and the convergence there. Why the awareness is so key. Because to our earlier conversation, and you know this as a behaviorist, right? We have to understand the pleasure seeking. We have to understand that we don't like discomfort, that we are prone to bouts of loneliness and depression, and that these are real human things that we have to deal with in our daily lives. Because if we don't, then every time it becomes difficult, every time it becomes uncomfortable, we're just going to give up. We're going to let our monkey brain turn back on and go back in and say, head in the sand. I don't want to have to, this is too hard. I don't want to have to deal with it. My life is fine. Like, it's fine enough. I'm just going to go for pleasure seeking. And so that awareness is so essential to realize, listen, being human feels messy and uncomfortable. And that's why I tell people all the time, I'll ask them, and I know you've asked people on the podcast before, what are you challenging yourself with right now? What feels yucky to you, right? And for me, right now, it's radical acceptance is one of the things where I'm really fighting to say, okay, certain people or things feel uncomfortable to me. Their beliefs and the way they talk or the way anything about them isn't the social norms that I know. It's not, they don't align with my beliefs of how we are supposed to treat people and their liberties. And can I accept those people? Can you
give a specific story about what that's been looking like recently for you?
Yeah, I think in corporate environments, it goes as far as to say the more, right? I grew up in an environment where everybody wore a suit and tie to the office every day, right? And as a matter of fact, my very first job, women weren't allowed to wear trousers or colored nail polish. Okay, this is how I know I'm older than that. So it's an airline that is no longer a business, at least I could say that. But that was professional dress, right? And so now, fast forward, I will have conversations with people where they say, we have people showing up to business calls with baseball hats or hoodies on, right? And I say, how do you feel about that? Are you willing to accept our new definition of what is acceptable attire, right? In terms of, and even taking it one step further, genderized attire, right? So like, why is fashion so genderized? And that's where I'm really pushing myself to really say, okay, what am I comfortable with in terms of a workplace? And what does that look like? Because I was so deeply socialized in terms of, my blouse could only be unbuttoned to one button and I was wearing pearls every day, right? And no colored nail polish. To now saying, oh, wait a minute, no, I'm wearing trainers to a board meeting, right?
Yeah.
And so it's as simple as little things like that to certainly more radical things where I look at people who have very different political beliefs than me and I say, can I accept them? Can I understand the perspective of where they're coming from when they are trying to take away human rights that I believe people are inherent in what people should have? And am I willing to accept that individual, even though I have a difference of opinion? And how can I listen to them and try to understand their perspective? It's uncomfortable, but it forces me to be the best human I can be, right? And that's where I say, this is how we as individuals need to challenge ourselves with discomfort, is to put ourselves into those positions and to, watch the television of news channels that isn't necessarily aligned with how we think, just to try to understand other people's perspectives.
It's so radically powerful. And I also can hear the voices of, it's like these group of guys I went to college with who I went to a baby shower with a year or two ago, and I could see them sort of rolling their eyes saying, well, no, the whole problem with the world today is that we have this sense of chaos because we're being too tolerant everywhere. And that can be a really seductive story to fall into. And so I want to sort of walk right into that and name that the power of expanding radical acceptance isn't to never create structure and to say there's never any boundaries or expectations or agreements, but it's to take radical responsibility for whatever your biases and thoughts and preferences are, and to acknowledge that not everything that you want to be building should be an exact reflection of all of the ideas, opinions, and biases that you're carrying. And so it's being really intentional about the battles you're going to fight so that you can be most efficient and effective with your energy. Because is it really a battle you want to fight at your company that you want to insist everyone has to wear a certain type of shoe? Is that relevant for your mission and what the business is doing? And if not, then why would you fight that battle to then diminish people's sense of autonomy? It's understanding, again, it's a business. Your job is to harness the potential of people. And so great, boundaries and agreements and structure are important. And you want to make sure you're being intentional about them, that you're not just letting something that you kind of think is the way that you think should be done is the way that gets imposed, unless it's really helpful to what you're trying to get done.
Right. No, completely. I'm a big believer in structure. I live for structure. And, I'm definitely not an anarchist. And I think the important element there is that we have to allow people enough of their own individual humanity. We've gotten so caught up in grouping people because people need that, right? We have one of my favorite sociologists, Rosabeth Moss-Kanner, actually my single favorite sociologist. She had a concept called homosocial reproduction, which is what has driven a lot of the problems that we have with inequities, right? It is the fact that the human brain is I can map you. I can look at you and I can see you look like me, right? So I have another 50-year-old woman with my skin color and dark hair and walks the same way. And I'm like, she seems like safety. And more deviations from that, the more my brain starts to question, right? And so this is something that we've been fighting in workplaces for forever, which is that, okay, how can we deal with the fact that we have to shut that part of our brain off to say looking different than me doesn't mean it's not safe, right? And so I think so much of that structure is to say, how can we create workplaces where people do have the psychological safety that they need so that they can move up Maslow's chain in order to say, what's at the end of Maslow's chain after we get through the basics? We get to aesthetics, we get to cognitive, we get to self-actualization, we get to transcendence. That's where all the beauty of humanity lies, right? In terms of really saying, can we give people the safety of their basic psychological needs met so they can really thrive as individuals? And so for me, it's no more simple than that, right? So to say we need enough structure where people can feel comfortable enough but still push the envelope of discomfort to get the best out of them. And to say that's where creativity really lies, in that little bit of chaos on a sound, structural, boundaried base.
Yeah, that's the magic place of creation, right? It's that human paradox that we are always both being and becoming. And so we have to be able to hold both of those. Like, yes, it's great. We want to create structure, but the structure also can't suffocate. Reed Hastings, in his book he wrote with, I think her name is Dr. Erin Meyer, the like no rules. So after the like Netflix PowerPoint of like, this is what our culture is, of like freedom and responsibility went really big. They like wrote that book. And I think it's like, it's got a second wind recently about like Netflix's culture. One of the things he talks about is the lessons he learned from his company before Netflix. What they did was, anytime a problem came up, they created a new process to prevent that problem from coming up. But then eventually, they had so many rules about how certain things had to be done, no A players wanted to stay at that company because it didn't allow them the freedom to be creative enough.
Right.
And so then innovation starts to stagnate. And so you can't over-structure stuff. So that's why you have to have intentional, wise structure. Just what's the structure that serves the creation that we want to be doing here?
Right. Yeah,
and like
completely.
I call it bare minimum. Like we think about MVP, like minimum viable product.
Right.
Think about that also for your culture, like taking a product management approach for how you structure your organization. What's the minimum viable structure to create the productivity and progress and like creation of value that you're trying to have happen there?
Right. And I think you're completely right. And it gets back to the discussion around why I do believe in organizations really understanding their story, right? And I think, the Netflix document got everybody, there's almost no one in business that hasn't seen the original document that went around.
Right.
You're right. The co-author is named Erin Meyer. She also wrote one of my favorite books called The Culture Map. That was her first book that she had written on her own. And she's a professor at NCI.
Which was kind of mind-blowing for me to read that, honestly. Because I was aware of it, like I studied philosophy and psychology and education undergrad, and I'm a licensed therapist. But to really think about how business is done in different cultures and just like step into that, such an amazing book. Right.
And it goes with the conversations we've had and we started with when we talk about early humans, right? Because humans in different cultures just formed differently. And so therefore, their approaches to hierarchy, to communication, to delivering negative feedback are all going to differ based on the construct and the demographics and the history and the longevity of those communities. And so it makes a lot of sense. People get irky when they say, oh, you're stereotyping. And I think part of the whole thing, and Erin says this, which is, it's actually you're doing more of a service, but it's because if you are going to sit in a meeting room and you have someone from a different culture and they're behaving a certain way, you're much more likely to start broad brushing them as being, oh, that person's quiet. They don't have any ideas to share. They don't have anything to contribute. If you're not aware that their culture is more wait till the end and then see what value I might have to, to add or be differential to the more senior people in the room, right? So it's the exact opposite, right? Where it is saying, wait a minute, I'm going to educate myself. And I'm a big believer in terms of that type of education and understanding people's differences. That is exactly how we can build diverse communities that are effective, because people will say, oh, wait, if you create more diversity in the organization does better. And it's like, no, that's just for the photo. That's the Christmas card photo will look better, but that's not it. We really need to connect and understand each other and understand our lived experiences, our cultural differences. And even some people that will quote, look the same, that doesn't mean they have the same experiences or they come from, some are first generation, second generation, third generation. Like, it's just everything is different in terms
of diversity of what? And how do we organize these people and processes in ways that create, again, the sort of progress that we want to be having? Just like pouring a bunch of people into a business and saying, great, we're diverse now. Oh, great. What is that going to accomplish?
Right. It doesn't do it. And you have to, and being able to have finding those common connection points, right? So being able to say, you and I are from a different age group or a different gender, but we found what connected us. And it's the way we think about workplaces, the way we think about the hope for technology and humanity, right? And we found that, and that it didn't matter that our demographics don't look the same.
Well, and that's the real magic of leadership. Daniel Coyle wrote this great book called The Culture Code. And he went and he studied all these, high performing cultures and what is it that they do? And ultimately he found 3 pieces, clarity, structure, and support, basically, where it's like there's the psychological safety, there's clarity of purpose, and there's like these structured processes. And one of the pieces in that book that I love was he looked into the San Antonio Spurs. And they have this coach, Greg Popovich, who looks very intense and like rigorous and like is like supposed to be this like very intense like disciplinarian who is shouting at all his players. And his players feel so deeply loved by him. They talk about him as like this father figure. But when they talk about their relationship with him, all of their relationships are different because he treats them all differently.
Right.
Because he figures out what's your psychology? Like, what's your internal operating system? And how do I relate within it in a way where I can best connect it with the other skills and weaknesses and learning opportunities and drives of all the other players here to have the best team possible? And so consistently, he's sustainably been one of the best coaches, regardless of what the players are that are there. With different types of players, he's still delivering elite coaching to get the greatest potential out of those people. And so like that's the magic.
Right.
The magic isn't just throwing a whole bunch of people with different skills and backgrounds together. The magic is then the next layer of, okay, how do I organize this piece? Like, how do I help people understand who they are so they can communicate their needs and their skills and strengths? How do I help them continue to develop? How do I match people with certain strengths in terms of what they're working on and who they work with? And like that's the real magic of really organizing a workplace that then can do ridiculously amazing things sustainably over time.
Right, completely. I remember one time I was at an executive committee meeting for the team that I was on. So I was the COO and we had the group head and the rest of my peers around the table. And I had gotten into a discussion with one of the other attendees about they had taken the cloth laundry bag from the hotel. And I said, did you steal that? And they said, no, there was no plastic bag for taking home my dirty laundry. And I said, but it's monogrammed with the hotel's logo. And they said, but they didn't provide me a plastic bag. So we're having this debate and someone else walks over and I said, what would be your opinion, right? And we ended up like raising it to the entire group to say, okay, which do you think is right? Is it stealing?
Was this a theft?
Was this theft, right? And the entire group, and what was amazing, and people came from so many different backgrounds and so many different cultures. And so it was really fascinating to hear how that had influenced their decision about whether they thought it was stealing and whether it mattered if there had been also had a plastic bag, or whether, by the way, I travel with my own dirty laundry bag that my business school gave me with their logo on it. So I said, I would never steal the monogram bag. Well, but you have one, right? Well, you can pack one too. So it was really just interesting that we spend this time at a break having this big conversation about something so simple. But it was really eye-opening to understand that there's not necessarily, sometimes there's gray areas, right? It's not as black and white, and really understanding that depth of saying, okay, I'm looking at you as a human and I want to understand how you think, why I see it as black and you see it as white. Why are we not seeing it the same way, and what's behind that? And does it matter, right? Did it really matter? I was ready to call the hotel and say, do you charge when people steal that? Because then it's stealing. And if not, then it's not stealing, right? So we needed an arbiter to come in.
Right. Okay, so I might be a bad podcaster because I'm doing this in what's probably reverse order for most people, but I'm really curious, this work around the convergence of awareness and humanity and technology, and this work that you do with helping to develop leaders and to help organizations really structure their businesses and leadership and learning and development in a way that is really, how would you even phrase the way that you want that to be? Like it's like human centric.
Yeah, and yes, human centric and just transformational, right? In terms of the journey for humanity. Yeah.
So I'm curious more of your life story of how'd you go from the finance world into now this being what your work is?
Right. I think I do have to rewind quickly on my origin story to say in university, I did study sociology. And that was coming as a very quiet, shy child that was always observing people, just the one sitting there looking around the room and seeing how fascinated with how adults interacted with each other. And when I studied sociology and with a certificate in human development, I mentioned the author earlier, Rosabeth Moss-Kenner. There was a like a foreshadowing, if you will, to this conversation. So you're a great podcast host.
Oh, thank you.
Which is Rosabeth Moss-Kenner wrote a book in the 70s called Men and Women of the Corporation. And I read that book and it changed everything for me because I thought, wait a minute, observing people is a job, right?
I have been really good at this without even knowing it.
I could be a sociologist and I could like study people in the workplace. This I could do, and I could write 20 years on, I could write the new version of this. And I said, I'm going to get a PhD. I know we talked, like your entire podcast is all people who could almost went for a PhD.
I know. It's like we will only have guests on here who thought about getting a PhD.
Exactly. It's clearly in the criteria. And for financial reasons, I'd lost my dad when I was in university. I had a mom who had never worked and younger siblings. And so I said, wait a minute, all these student loans, I'm working. And so I said, she wrote this book, which was, as a sociologist, an immersion in a company where she profiled all the people, right? And it was amazing because she categorized them into groupings, and it blew me away. And I said, okay, so I can't be her as a sociologist. I'm a professor of sociology, but I'm going to be her as an experiential sociologist. And I spent the rest of my career, 25 years, doing exactly that. So my entire finance career was watching people, learning about how social structures and workplaces develop, how people interact with each other, their motivations, when they behave badly, when they behave kindly, and why, and what drives that. And under pressure, do they act differently? When all of a sudden there's a deadline, does the kinder, more compassionate, more human manager now become a tyrant? And just really mapping it as waiting to write that new version of the book. And so for me, it might seem surprising to people that I came out of a senior executive career in investment banking and private equity and all of a sudden have now found this home. But it was always part of my journey, right? It was where I was going. And so for me, when I finally said, okay, I finished my research project, I'm done on the observation, the experiences are done. Now, how am I going to use all of that? And so that's what I've been doing for the last 6 years, right? Is really saying, now how can I put into practice the understanding everything that I've observed and the changes and understanding how humans work and the social structures that we create in the workplaces and challenges, because it changes every year. Over the last 5 years, we have new challenges. Right. We weren't talking about work from home or hybrid or any of that 5 years ago. These are more complicated new. So there's always something new. And so for me, it's just a natural progression. And I think observing where technology has been going and how fast it is picking up, that was just a natural part of the model, right? Where it had to be. It wasn't just enough to say, listen, I believe that humans do better the more aware they are, both of how they think and how they feel, and when they're much more conscious of human principles, of what I call human skills, or what we used to call soft skills or power skills, I think we've called it. When people have those two things, they just build better workplaces, more successful, long-term sustainable workplaces. And now this third element is how technology can help us do those things. So that's how I got to where I am now, right? That's how the model was built, is that I was always a student of it. I'm really more deep breaths.
Yeah, I'm sitting in an appreciation because I have a really deep admiration and respect for folks that really try to pay very close attention to all the dynamics that go on around them. And I've experienced it as a haunting. And most people that I talk to, I feel like it's there too. It's like this haunting, question, or this haunting sharpening that wants to sort of make sense of it. It's like observing all these different variables going on. And then it's like this question of yeah, but why that? And why that? And sort of trying to piece together this story. And I hear that also in your story, that it's like all these years of observing how people are interacting in these spaces and wanting to make sense of it, and this like continual question of why, leading to like greater and greater wisdom and knowledge and capacity to then help people sort of navigate and orient to what the hell they're trying to do.
Right. And how often, right, let's be honest, it's not like I got on that path in the 90s and said, this is what I'm doing for the next 25 years.
Right,
There were plenty of times where I deviated off the path and then had to wake up and say, oh, wait a minute, right? Like I actually care. Like it's easy to get, when you're in a corporate environment, I was in investment banking, right? Flying around the globe. Thousands of people, had responsibility for people in
There's
80
a lot of games
plus
to drop into there.
countries. Yeah, completely. I was one of the only women always at the table, like always one of the only women. So I had to deal with that additional element. And so it gets, you're on the treadmill, right? When you're running on the treadmill, you don't get to also say, okay, let me stop for a moment and think, right, about how it's going. So, but I constantly had to keep coming back to those moments. And I would do it when I found myself spiraling downward, when I found myself overwhelmed or frustrated or depressed or exhausted, and said, okay, breather, take a step back here. What is going, right? And it was not banging into the wall, crashing into it, as we talked about earlier, but just like seeing the wall on its way, right? And about to run into it and saying, whoa, wait a minute, I just rubbed noses with that wall. And so that's where I try to get people to have their eyes wide open to say, you don't want to wait until your nose is broken. You want to see the wall coming and say, wait a minute, what path do I want to be on as a human? Where am I going and what am I doing in this world? Because, you know, it isn't, I know it sounds cliche, but it's not about the destination. I don't have a destination I know the path. Right? And I hope I continue, like, I hope my last breath, I never get to where it is I'm going, that I'm still on that right path, and I will journey off and journey back on. And that's okay. That's the amazing part of being a privileged human and getting to experience so much in life. But it is about knowing the directionally where you're heading.
Mm. And when we first met during Tech Week at that networking event, you shared a story from a TED Talk that you have coming up soon.
Yes.
Coming out soon. We will drop that on Mattermore channels whenever that does drop.
Yes.
And I'm curious if you could talk a little bit about that like moment that you referenced within that talk.
Yeah, that was funny that you and I both had been on silent retreat and had similar moments.
We shared a little bit of those stories. I was like, I need to talk more with her.
Which was because, you know, my very first silent retreat, and I was running a meeting at 3:00 in the afternoon, and I got on a flight to Italy that night, like an 11 p.m. flight to go on my very first 5-day silent retreat. So
what did you think was going to come out of that experience for you?
You know, I thought it was going to help me make a clean break because I knew I was leaving my corporate career. I wasn't just leaving one employer and going to another. I was ready to do something different. I had done it for 20 plus years and it was time to do something different. And even I was running a meeting. My boss had to come into the office and say, can we have you in the break room? I said, no, I'm running this meeting. And he said, I need you in the break room. And he said, everybody's in there with cupcakes. I said, oh, okay. And I went in and the entire group was there, including my boss's boss. And I said, oh gosh, sorry. I was really busy I was still running meetings.
Working up until the last minute.
Yeah, really. So I knew I was going to need a clean break because it's just how I'm wired. So, and I thought, if I don't, Monday morning, I will still be calling and messaging. Did you get that done? You were supposed to do this. And I said, like, I had a successor already lined up. Someone was stepping into the role. I just needed to be able to back away. And I said, I'm going to do something radical. And I'm going to go on a silent retreat. I just need 5 days. It's like doing a cleanse for the mind, right? And so I said, that's what I'm doing. And the story, and I do tell this in my TED because my TEDx is called What Silence Can Teach Us About Superintelligence. That journey for me was the first day thinking, what am I doing here? And then the second day saying, oh, wow, this feels pretty nice. And day 3 going, oh my God, this is a disaster. The world is an absolute mess. I am this tiny little ant and I'm going to make no impact in the world. And I'm never going to be able to leave here. And this is absolutely horrible. And it was for me was that my brain had been detoxified. So all the stuff I had been burying deep inside me, all the suffering and for my own and the rest of the world, it all surfaced, right? And so I had major epiphanies about relationships in my life and people that I felt had just not served me in a way. And I ended up, walking away from certain relationships as a result of it. And so that day 3 was, the explosion for me. And then, when I finally came out of it, day 4, day 5 was, wait a minute. There is a way. There is the world. I do matter. It doesn't have to be that every single individual doesn't matter, because the world progresses. So people matter, right? So if other people matter, why not me? Why can't I not? And if I can matter, then doesn't everybody matter? And once I had that click, I realized, okay, but wait a minute. It's going to need to be impact has to be at scale. You need to be able to solve problems in a way that is irrefutable, where you really are able to turn knowledge and wisdom into solutions in a way that you're not fighting about it. And the epiphany that came to me was, okay, machine intelligence is really honestly all we have left going for us as humans, because as in an analog world, we have been trying to coach and teach and train and lead people to be better, particularly in workplaces, right? How to role model all these human skills.
And you mean in terms of, we've been trying in an analog process to really radically upskill the skills people are walking around with, how they relate with one another.
Exactly, right? So we tell people, here's how you have to be more empathetic. You need to be more compassionate. You need to understand your DISC and your Myers-Briggs and your Hogan, and understand how you as an individual works, because this is how you're interfacing with the other people that you're working with every day. And that means you need to hack, right? You need to hack your own system, because there are times where you're going to go in this direction and that's not good for other people or for the organization. And there's leadership books galore and coaches galore that do this, and they're effective at it, but it's slow and it's painful and it's not 100% effective. And so I said, what would be a better way? And that's where the machine intelligence, artificial intelligence comes in for me, which is saying, okay, wait a minute. If we can figure out how we can help humans be more human, if we can figure out for it to tell me all the things I know I want to think, do, believe, act on, say, if it can say, don't forget, Elizabeth, this is how you want to react when that customer service agent tells you your flight's been canceled, not me saying, are you kidding me? And how am I going to get there? I need to get there by tomorrow. Realizing, okay, wait a minute. I don't want machine intelligence to hear this. Oh, this is how people talk to customer service agents. This is how we're going to build our models going forward, right? If I can stop and say, okay, wait a minute, where's the little buzzer telling me, zapping me on the wrist? It tells me to stand up, right? It already did that. Right, I've been sitting for too long. Right. Why can't it tell me, Elizabeth, change your tone? That's not how we speak to customer service agents. It's not how you want to speak, because you've told me that's not how you want to. And so that's where it hit me, that said, oh, wait a minute. I can have a buddy, right? I could have a machine buddy that might help me be more the person that I want to be, right? And we're seeing this in the work that you're doing in workplaces, right? Really looking at core processes of how people interact and relate to each other, and saying, how can we use machines to assist in that? Because we know how we want it to be. We've just been unable to do it in an analog world.
Totally. And so one thing I want to name is also just the that day 3. That day 3 is what got me too.
I think you had it worse than I did, if I recall. But
yeah, it was also my first retreat, and it was like, man, what a day 3. I turned my phone in during day 1. It's like this noble silence where they ask, you're not going to make eye contact with anybody.
Right.
And also have a little basket. Would you like to turn in your phone? And I was like, yeah, I'm going to turn in my phone. I'm going to unplug. I'm going to be with me, and I'm going to get into this experience. And by day 2, I was like, I am relaxed.
Yes.
This is nice. And then that day 3, man, I sweated through an entire shirt. It's like all of my armor, the way that I saw it, all of my armor of my busy mind with all of my to-do lists and all of my judging and all my planning, all these things that my mind was so used to doing, now didn't need to be running. And by like just spending some time, allowing it some space to settle and me just sort of like acknowledge it and sort of like not feed into it, started to quiet down. And then I'm just left with this bare, raw vulnerability where I'm just seeing so much of this scarcity and fear and nervousness that I just had always been carrying, but just what didn't have an awareness of.
Right.
And it rocked me. And I after like, I got up, I walked around for a little while, and then I went back and I got my phone. I like had to go to one of the meditation teachers. So I was like, I need my phone. I need it. I need it. And we like sat for a while, and she was so kind and like compassionately like talked to me, and like we did like a self-compassion practice together. And I was like, thank you so much. I still need my phone. then I got it, and I called my mentor who had like convinced me to go on this thing, and he didn't answer, but I was ready to be like, Philip, why did you make me do this? You have broken me. I have broken me. I am broken. He didn't answer, and then I just went on a walk, and then like had this like 3-hour rumble. But man, that day 3 rocked me.
You know, I hear that that's actually pretty common.
Yeah.
I've talked to people since that there's something about day 3. Like those first 3 days are really, it's a very similar journey that people go through in terms of bottoming out. I think it is just something that happens with the mind.
That day 3.
And when you get to that point, I remember when I stopped talking to myself, I remember I was so self-congratulatory because it's also noble silence. And I'm like, wow, look at me not thinking. Oh, wait, or not speaking and I'm like, wait, no, I'm talking to myself. Stop talking to yourself. I thought, oh, this is not healthy. I'm talking to myself to stop talking to myself.
I was there. There was this one woman in her 70s who came up to me at one point when it was I think day 2. I was like sitting there, and she came up to me. She was like, I need to talk to someone. She's like, well, you don't have to say anything back, but I just need to speak. And she was like whispering things to me. She's like, is that okay? And I was like, yeah. And I'm just like not going to say anything back. And it was so funny.
Yeah, we had a couple, and they were rooming together, and I kept saying, P.S. They're not talking.
Oh, that would be hard.
I was so judgy. I'm watching them giving them the side eye.
I know you guys find your secret places to talk.
Whispering at night, lying in bed whispering. I know they are.
But there's another thread that I want to see if I can sort of land the plane on that I'm seeing, which is about that insight moment that you had. That we're back at hope. Which is like after that day 3 rumble, where then there's like this like descending into real suffering and pain of just like acknowledging these things that weren't working, like these harms within relationships, the ways that like you let yourself down, the ways like you not being aware of certain things hurt, the way other people had hurt you, and then like a real like a hopelessness that's growing of like oh my gosh, this is so big, and then there's like a descending that happens there. And then there's this hope that is like, oh, and now that I've acknowledged this pain, it's like that actually needs to be part of our process to actually have the deepest, widest sense of hope that we possibly can, that can empower our motivation to take massive creative action, that you have to do that acknowledging of that suffering, because that deepens the roots that hope can then root into. And it's like, okay, you can acknowledge that. And then only once you've fully seen it, which is the magic of why awareness is important. So you have access to more data of your experience. So then you can see it all, you can acknowledge it, and you can see how far deep down you are in like the cavern or the valley. You say, oh my gosh, it's so dark down here. And only then, once you've really like looked around beneath you, then you can look up and you'll be like, oh, but there's a way up.
Right.
It's like, oh, there's a way up. Oh, I can climb. Oh,
Right.
oh, I can walk.
Right.
Oh, great. Which way do I? Oh, I want to go that way.
Right.
Oh, great. But we spend so much of our time avoiding looking in the dark parts.
Completely.
That's when we end up feeling lost.
Right.
Because then you start to sort of lock off certain doors, and then you don't have the visibility. You can't see that like light at the end of the tunnel. So
Right.
it's so important. And it reminds me of, I went to this talk with Pema Chodron. It was her last talk in the U.S. She's just aging, and now she's not leaving whatever part of Canada that she's in. And this woman stood up to ask a question because she'd been talking about self-compassion this whole time. And this was like, I think a week after the Uvalde school shooting. And this woman stood up and she was like, I was a teacher in Connecticut at that school where there was a shooting, and I'm a Black woman. And so my motto has been always wear comfortable shoes in case I need to march. And so I want to be more self-compassionate. I want to have more compassion, and I don't want to be idle.
Right.
I don't want to just accept things as they are and then do nothing. And one, like the most amazing aspect of that experience was actually watching the way that Pema listened. There was such like magic in just the way, like the non-judgmental way that she listened, you could see was just healing for people. But then she said this really insightful thing back that I feel like really relates to everything we've been talking about. And she talked about Matthew Ricard, which is the name that comes up if you Google happiest man in the world. Because he was part of that research at the University of Wisconsin on meditation, and they put him in an MRI machine.
Yes,
and they asked him to do this
study.
like compassionate meditation and to just think about suffering. They wanted to see his mind. And after a few minutes, he tapped out. He's like, no. This is not how it's supposed to work. I can't just sit here and just think about the suffering. You have to both breathe in and breathe out. And so he was like, I'll show you how it's done. He like plugged back in, and what he did was he would think about, I think he mentioned talking about these Romanian orphanages and like the suffering there. And he was thinking about that. And so he would breathe that in and like feel the immensity of the suffering of that. And he would breathe out something that he wanted to offer that could help, whether it was like love that he wanted to send to those children, or he wanted to think about some productive act that he could do, and he wanted to visualize himself doing that. And that it's both the breathing in and the breathing out.
Exactly.
And then he like processes what's in his body, and he like all of his motivation centers are lit up. And so there's this like relationship between acknowledging the suffering that we experience that's important, that actually unlocks the hope that we want to be able to access, that you can't actually have one without the other,
Right.
that they feed one another. And that's also the magic that then comes with machines and AI right now, which is, again, we're overwhelmed. And it's a criticism I hear from so many folks is like, do we really need machines to help us like live well in this world now? Shouldn't we just, just relate better with people? And a part of that just is disingenuous.
Right.
Because like the phones aren't going away, the internet's not going away. These technologies are here. We have to figure out a way to relate with them. And so the magic of AI and machine learning is their processing power allows us to have more creative ability for how we relate with all of that information, so we can actually see, experience, and acknowledge more of what we're experiencing, so that then we can figure out the productive actions to take going forward. Because there's just too much data. There's too much information. And so to actually have this collaborative partner, like this collaborative mindfulness with machines, to actually build them in ways where they could be a co-pilot or an assistant or a supportive agent, whatever you want to call it. But it actually helps you figure out, who is it that I really want to be? What is it that I'm experiencing? And how is the way that I'm showing up aligned with that? So like to get another set of eyes that just knows, how do you want to be living, that then can be giving you feedback. It is the thing that we need, and that it can be done in ways that we can trust, because we can trust our hands to advocate for it to be done well. And so that's just like more of the hopeful story that I'm seeing there that I want to name.
And I think, when you talk about that into the abyss moment, it's really important for people to understand that if they're going to go down the path of trying to be more aware and trying to be more intentional about how they engage with others and how they engage with technology, they're going to end up in that dark place. And it's
not a matter of if.
They will. It's 100% guaranteed they will. Yeah. And the question is, when you get down there and you find a lot of really ugly stuff, what are you willing to take with you, and what do you leave behind? So how can you leave guilt and shame and regret and things that are not constructive, but take with you, an aspiration and hope and compassion and self-forgiveness. Let's leave, negative self-talk there, but let's bring self-forgiveness with us. And so really being willing to filter, that's hard work. that is really hard, internal human work. It's exhausting. Our brains they don't want to do it. Our brains would rather shut off. They would rather go and stream television or scroll on our phones.
Yeah, have
right?
a sugary snack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All the toxins are there for a reason. That's why we call them toxins. And so it's really hard work. And I just want to make sure people are aware that the hope is on the other side of that, because I came out of my first silent retreat heartbroken. I really did. And while I am hopeful, I am still heartbroken. I'm heartbroken because I just know the potential that we have. I really know that we can build a better world. I think the greatest lie that we have allowed people to believe is that they don't matter, that they're just one person and that what they do and their actions don't matter. And now with technology, everything is exponential. People do actually matter. And that is why I have hope, because I really think it's not just about the change makers. It's just not about the small elite group of programmers or thought leaders or politicians or whatever it is. Every human has the potential to really matter and to make a difference. And if we can do that, and we can be willing to understand that dark abyss, when we go down there to really understand ourselves and understand the world, it's going to be hard. But there's hope on the other side of it. So that's the key message, because I'm hopeful, but join me in being heartbroken, because I'm not walking around like Pollyanna here. I'm pretty heartbroken, and I will spend probably the rest of my life trying to repair that broken heart.
Thank you for sharing that. I have chills.
Oh.
And a part of that is because for years, I've started off talks by saying, I am both heartbroken and hopeful. Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that really, I think that's really what we need, because that's the truth. If you really just look around in your own life and then take another sphere step out and take a look at like the lives of those people around you and the lives those people are connected to, there's a lot to be heartbroken about. Yeah, and there's so much to be hopeful for. And that the real power is not in trying to delete the heartbreak or avoid the heartbreak or to only hold tight to the hope. The real power is actually in being able to hold both.
Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah. And to let that heartbreak fuel you, right? To just know that's part of being human. We're going to be anyone who's ever loved has also been heartbroken, right?
Yeah,
and you know the feeling. And there's power in that. We're never more human than that, right? Than that moment where we feel, so grab onto it, right? And say, I'm going to use that to fuel my power to make a difference. Yeah,
I was stopped somewhere in the city by like one of those TikTokers with a microphone, just randomly asking people questions the other day. It was like maybe 2 months ago. And the question he asked me was, did anything productive and good come out of your last heartbreak? Mm. And I took a deep breath. And what I said was, actually, the fractures that came in the wake of that heartbreak created the space for the roots of everything good in my life right now.
Wow.
That actually, like, the fruits of anything that I've done since that heartbreak, I can't separate from it. That it's deeply connected to and like fuels the soil of everything good that I feel deep gratitude for.
I love that. Yeah, it's a great question that he asked that. And I have to say, I've thought a lot about it too, because I lost someone in my life who I would say was the only person that I ever felt unconditionally loved me. And losing them was really difficult. But the thing that came out of it, it broke my heart. The thing that came out of it was I realized we all have the power to unconditionally love ourselves. And that was an epiphany that it took me 40-something years to get to, which was, well, wait a minute. It's really hard for other people to unconditionally love you. They're always going to have some form of expectation or need. You're serving them. You're in a relationship with them. It's just nearly impossible. But we have the power to unconditionally love ourselves. And so the fact that I lost that love, I realized I didn't, because now I have it for myself. I can love myself with all my flaws and all my mistakes and all my insecurities, and that's okay. And so I walk around every day with unconditional love now.
It's funny because that heartbreak that I talked about, it was also the only person I ever felt unconditionally loved by. And like, it was such a earth-shattering experience, because it then brings up this question of like, oh my God, will I be loved again? Can I be loved?
Right.
And then what it became was, it was like it was like a touch tree. It was like the greatest gift was like, oh, in that relationship with her, I was able to touch that.
Right.
I felt that. And like, it healed like shame within me that was keeping me from being able to accept aspects of myself. But I had experienced it and like was part of creating it. I was part of that relationship. It wasn't like she gave it to me.
Right.
It was within that relationship. And then it was like, oh, well, now that I've touched it, I can figure out how to like find it again and like open it up and like spread it out and have other roots that can plug into it.
Completely. Yeah, we think love is something that like someone else gives to us, but it's not. It is, we feel it when we express it, right? And so it is so much about the relationship with ourselves. And
Totally.
so, but I love, the being able to conjure it, right, is so powerful, because now you know what it feels like, you know what it looks like, and I can feel that for myself.
Yeah, we get really obsessed with love stories and romantic love relationships, particularly in like the modern world. We've sort of lost our deep affinity and appreciation for like friendships and like the love that exists there. And I think a ton of that makes sense, right? And again, this time where we're overwhelmed and people feel so lonely, and it's like, it's socially acceptable to be like really obsessed with like a loving romantic relationship. It's like, it's all around us and all of the messaging.
Right.
And so like, there's like that obsession with it. But, I don't work with clients anymore, but for years there were just over and over again, so many clients just feel this like deep anxiety and like not enoughness, and all of their sense of self-worth came from one relationship. And like, we're obsessed with the potential love story arc of it all. And I have friends that like I can see like they don't really have a sense of confidence in their life.
Right.
And they're obsessed with like, what some might call love addiction. Just like, oh, the next person they meet, that's the person I'm supposed to be in love with. And it's this like deep yearning to want to feel loved and important and that we matter, because we yearn for that validation. And like, the line I often use is, instead of us being obsessed with gaining love or achieving love or someone giving us love, instead of being obsessed with the story of love, like, let's be obsessed with the practice of love. Like, what can I be a little bit more excited about the love that I get to give? Can I be interested and engaged in the love that I get to build and give out, and see what comes from that?
Completely. Yeah, I did a blog post maybe last year, I think, called Work Love. And I talked all about, and I actually individually sent it to some colleagues that I said, I thought of you because I have loved colleagues that I have worked with just as human beings, right? Where I was able to connect with them in a way where I can literally say, I love this person.
Yeah.
I care about their happiness. I care about their joy, about their journey. I'm there for them. They're drop everything type people. And I think we underplay that, how beautiful that can be, the power of friendships.
Totally.
Yeah.
When you think about the future of work and what it looks like, what do you most hope for?
I really hope that people don't give up. I hope that people look at the future of work and say, there's a way to be successful. There's a way to, to use all of our intellect and to use our technology and to use our capabilities and human ingenuity to actually move the world forward in a way that makes life better for people, right? And I think people think right now that it's a trade-off between commercial success and, okay, well, I'm going to work for this company, I'm going to make a lot of money, and then I'm going to use that money and give it back to make the world better. And it's like, or maybe we could just figure out how to get the work onto the path of making life better. Now, wouldn't that save a step? So that's what I most desire, and that's what I'm most hopeful. And that's tricky, because I think there's a lot of companies that then will have to take a real hard look at what they produce and how they serve the world and say, should we continue to be, is this our highest and best use as humans? Should we continue to be manufacturing the things that we do and serving people in the way that we do? And those are difficult conversations because there's money and there's lives and there's everything tied up in those decisions. But that's what I'm most hopeful for, because I think there are so many problems to be solved, and I think the world has I believe in abundance, right? So that's where I think the future of work looks like for me, right? And that's what I'm most hopeful of, is for people to say we can be both successful and we can build fulfillment into the system, and we can solve human suffering by really thinking hard about what we're doing as companies. It's difficult. It's not going to be easy, but I think the more each of us as individuals has that vision, the more companies will really have no choice but to get on board and start to say, it's fine. I do a presentation called Beyond Bigger, Better, Faster. It doesn't mean I'm not for bigger, better, faster, but there's something else beyond. And I think that's where I want companies to start thinking about that as well. Like, let's do bigger, let's do better, let's do faster, but where else can that technology take us?
Amen.
Amen.
Well, I'm walking away from this conversation with a lot of ideas around leadership and structuring organizations, as well as a deeper appreciation for you and
Likewise.
A tender gratitude for heartbreak and a stronger sense of hope. So thanks for being here, and thanks for those gifts.
Likewise. I'm glad I got to hear so much from you, because we don't always get to on the podcast. So this was a perfect conversation, Matt. Thank you so much.
And if folks are listening and they want to know more about you, they want to engage more with the content you're creating or learn more about your work, where can they find that?
LinkedIn is usually the best place to find me. It sends them to wherever else I might be hanging out in the world.
Awesome. And we will link all those things in the show notes. Elizabeth, thanks for being here. Everybody, thanks for listening.
Thanks for having me, Matt.